40 amps. That was the first thing I noticed when I walked into the barn where my sister was getting married, before I saw a single face I knew. Somebody had run 4 extension cords off one outlet to power the string lights and the caterer's warmers and a fog machine, all daisy-chained together, the whole rig pulling more current than that old circuit was ever built to carry. A small thing. The kind of thing nobody sees unless seeing it is your whole life. To everyone else, it was fairy lights and ambiance. To me, it was a fire waiting for a reason. Funny, looking back, that I spotted the hazard in the wiring a full 10 minutes before I spotted the one in the tuxedo. My parents found me near the gift table. I hadn't even gotten my coat off. My mother, Pam, did a little double take, like she was trying to place a coworker out of context, and my father, Dale, stood beside her with a glass of wine he wasn't drinking, and the two of them looked at me for a long moment in a way I hadn't been looked at in 9 years. "You came," my mother said, and then, before I could answer, she said the thing. She turned and looked out over the whole decorated barn, the lights and the flowers and the 300 chairs, and a strange little frown crossed her face, and she said, almost to herself, "Isn't this beautiful? Though I keep having the oddest feeling all day, like something's missing. Don't you feel that, Dale?" I stood right there in front of her while she wondered aloud what could possibly be missing. I didn't say anything. I'd gotten very good, over the years, at not saying things. But across the room, near the head table, my sister's fiancé had just turned around to see what his future mother-in-law was looking at, and his eyes landed on me, and I watched the color drain out of his face like someone had pulled a plug. He set his drink down too fast. It tipped. And then Garrett, the groom, the catch, the self-made man my parents could not stop bragging about, stood up so suddenly his chair scraped back and fell over behind him. Because Garrett knew exactly who I was. He'd just never known whose sister I was. If you've ever been raised to believe you were the spare and not the heir, the backup and not the plan, then you already know the particular silence I'm talking about, the one I built my whole adult life out of. Stick with me, because I'm going to tell you how a man I'd reported to the state 2 years earlier ended up engaged to my sister, and what I did with that, and it is not what either of us expected. But before the wedding goes where it goes, do me one small favor, because these comments are the best part of doing this. Tell me down below the exact words your family used when they decided you didn't need help. Be independent. You're the strong one. You'll figure it out. I collect them. And if you're someone who got told to figure it out and then went and actually did, hit subscribe right now, because this whole channel is a room full of people who figured it out, and I'd like you in it. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the kitchen where the word independent first got used as a weapon. I was 17. Acceptance letters had come in, the good kind, from a state school with a strong engineering program, and I'd done the math on what we'd need, and I sat my parents down at the kitchen table to talk about it like an adult, because I thought that was what they wanted from me. I had the financial aid forms. I had a part-time job already. I needed them to co-sign and to help with the gap, the way parents do, the way I'd watched them prepare to do for my younger sister Haley, since she was about 11. My father folded his hands on the table. He had a speech ready. I could tell because he'd cleaned his glasses first, which he only did before things he'd rehearsed. "Your mother and I have talked about it," he said, "and we think the best thing for you, the most loving thing, is to let you be independent. You're so capable. You've always been capable. You'll appreciate it more if it's yours. We don't want to rob you of that. The most loving thing. To give me nothing." Worded so that refusing to help me became a gift they were generously bestowing. Here is what made it land the way it did. 2 feet away on the refrigerator was a brochure for a private arts college with a tuition that would have paid for my entire degree 3 times over. And that brochure was Haley's, and there had never been 1 second of conversation about whether Haley would be made to appreciate anything by being deprived of it. Haley was 14 at the time. The plan for Haley was already total and unquestioned. The plan for me was a word: independent. I'm not going to pretend my sister and I were enemies. We weren't. Haley was a kid, and you can't hate a 14-year-old for the weather her parents made. But the house had 2 climates, and we both knew which one each of us lived in. When Haley wanted ballet, there was ballet. When she wanted the arts college, there was the arts college, and then a study abroad year, and then a finding her footing apartment in the city paid for in full while she figured out what she loved. When I wanted a chemistry tutor in 10th grade, I was told it would build character to struggle through it on my own. I had a lot of character by the time I was 18. I was made almost entirely of character. It is not as warm to live inside as money, so I left. Not dramatically. That's the part people expect. The slammed door, the screaming. There wasn't any. I just stopped waiting for them to choose me, because I'd finally understood they already had chosen, years ago, and the choice wasn't me. I took the job I had, found 2 more, and I went to community college at night for an associate's I could actually afford, and somewhere in a required course I stumbled into the trade that would become my whole life: electrical. I loved it the way you love a thing that finally makes sense. Electricity doesn't care whose daughter you are. It follows rules, hard ones, beautiful ones, and if you respect the rules, it does exactly what you tell it, and if you disrespect them, it kills you, and there's an honesty in that I'd never gotten from people. A wire is never passive-aggressive. A breaker never tells you that tripping is the most loving thing it can do for you. I apprenticed for a contractor named Sully, who didn't care that I was a woman as long as I showed up early and didn't lie to him. 2 things I was extremely good at: 4 years to journeyman, a couple more to master electrician, which is a license you earn by knowing not just how to make the lights come on, but how to keep a building from burning down around the people sleeping in it. By 25, I'd saved enough and learned enough to start taking my own jobs. By 27, I had 3 trucks, a handful of guys, and a name in our city for being the outfit that did it right when other people did it cheap. 9 years after a kitchen table and a clean pair of glasses, I owned a company. Nobody co-signed anything. Turns out my father was right about one thing. I did appreciate it more because it was mine, every wire of it. He just never understood that I'd have traded all that appreciation in a heartbeat for 1 year of having been worth investing in. Now, here's where the man in the tuxedo comes in, and I need you to hold 2 timelines in your head because they're about to crash into each other in a barn full of fairy lights. About 2 years before that wedding, my company took a job on a flip. A house in a nice part of town, bought cheap, getting dressed up fast to sell high. The man running the flip called himself a developer, and he hired us to do the electrical, and from the first week he was a problem. He wanted everything fast and cheap, the 2 words that get people electrocuted. He wanted us to skip the permit inspection to save time. He wanted aluminum where it didn't belong. He wanted us to certify work we hadn't finished so he could list the house before it was safe. I said no. I always say no to that, because the no is the entire reason my name means what it means. We did the parts we'd been contracted for correctly, up to code, and then he refused to pay the back half of the invoice. Stiffed us for almost $20,000. That happens in this trade more than you'd think, and usually you eat some of it and move on. But this man did something you don't move on from. After we walked, he brought in an unlicensed crew to finish on the cheap, and then he forged a final inspection sign-off using my company's license number to make the work look like ours, so the house would pass and sell. He put my name, the name I'd spent years making clean, on dangerous work I'd refused to do. That house sold to a young couple. 4 months later, the wiring his cheap crew had buried in a wall overheated, and there was a fire. Nobody died. I want to say that part plainly because it matters. The couple got out, the dog got out, but half the house was gone, and it was the middle of the night, and it was very, very close. When the fire marshal pulled the records, my company's name was on the inspection, my license number, my reputation, on the worst work I never did. It took me 4 months and a lawyer and the fire marshal's own report to prove the sign-off was forged, that we documented walking off the job before any of that wiring went in. I was cleared completely. And I filed a formal complaint with the state licensing board against the man who'd done it, with all the paper to back it, because a man who'll forge a safety inspection will do it again, and the next family might not get out. By the time the complaint was working its way through the board, the man had vanished from our market. Changed the name of his little company, moved his flips 2 counties over, the way that kind always does, staying 1 town ahead of the people who know what he is. His name was Garrett Vale. You can probably see it now, the shape of the thing, the way I saw it when I walked into that barn and clocked the dangerous wiring and then looked up and saw the bride and groom's table and saw him standing behind it in a rented tuxedo with my sister's hand in his. The man who forged my inspection and nearly burned a family alive was about to marry Haley, the golden child, the one they spent everything on. And not one person in my family had any idea, because to them he was Garrett the developer, Garrett the success, Garrett who my mother had described in the 1 stiff phone call she'd made to invite me as exactly the kind of man we always hoped Haley would find. They'd vetted him the way they vetted everything, by the shine, and I, the daughter they'd thrown away for not coming pre-shined, was the only person within 500 miles who knew the shine was painted on a man who put cheap wire in walls and other people's names on the lie. If your stomach just did something, then you understand why I tell these. Somewhere out there right now is a person walking into a room full of people who never protected them, carrying the one piece of truth that could blow the whole thing open, trying to decide what to do with it. If that's ever been you, the subscribe button is how you find the rest of us. So press it and let's keep going. because I had about a 4-hour window to decide who I was going to be. Let me tell you what those 4 hours were actually like, because the movies get this part wrong. There's no swelling music when you realize you're holding a grenade at your sister's wedding. There's just a barn and a band tuning up, and your mother asking if you've eaten, and a man across the room sweating through his rented shirt every time you move. Garrett found me first. Of course he did. He cornered me by the coat rack maybe 20 minutes in, and up close he was older and more frightened than the smooth operator I remembered from the job site. "You're her sister," he said. Low, fast. "Quinn, you're Quinn, Haley's sister Quinn who moved away." He laughed, the way people laugh when nothing is funny. "This is insane. What are the odds?" "You forged my inspection," I said. "You nearly killed a family. You're under complaint with the board right now, this minute, while you're standing here in that suit." He got close, and his voice dropped into something I recognized from the job site, the threat that wears the costume of reason. Listen to me. That's all behind me. I've changed everything. I love Haley, I genuinely do, and your family, they're good people. They've been so good to me." A pause, calculating. "You blow this up, you don't hurt me. You hurt her. You hurt your mom and dad in front of 300 people. You really want to be the one who detonates your sister's wedding? After everything? You'll be the villain forever." That's the story they'll tell. The bitter one who couldn't be happy for her sister. He'd read the family fast, I'll give him that. He'd found the exact lever they'd been pulling on me my whole life. Be quiet, be good, don't make a scene, don't be difficult. He was using my own family's training against me, and the awful thing was that it worked, a little. For about 10 seconds, standing by that coat rack, I felt 17 again, told that the most loving thing I could do was disappear quietly so I wouldn't inconvenience the people who mattered. Then I thought about the couple and the dog and the middle of the night. Here's what I want you to understand about that moment, because it's the hinge the whole thing turns on. The decision in front of me was never really revenge. I could have had revenge 9 years ago by burning a different barn, the one in my chest. The decision was simpler and harder than revenge. My sister, the girl who got everything I didn't, the favorite, the one it would have been so easy to let walk straight into this, was about to marry a man who buries danger in walls and signs other people's names to it, and I was the only one who knew. If I stayed quiet to be the good daughter one last time, Haley became the next family in the next house with the bad wiring in the walls. Except this time the bad wiring was the man, and the house was her whole life. So I made my choice. And I made it the way I do everything in my trade, which is correctly, by the rules, in the right order, without burning anything down that doesn't need to burn. I didn't stand up at the reception and scream the truth across the cake. That's what Garrett expected. Because Garrett only understood the loud version of power, I went and found my sister. Haley was in a side room with 2 bridesmaids in her dress, glowing, 26 years old and happier than I'd seen her since we were children. And when she saw me in the doorway, her whole face changed, and for a second, I braced for her to be annoyed that the difficult sister had shown up to difficult things. Instead, she crossed the room and hugged me so hard it knocked the breath out of me. "You came," she whispered, and she was crying, and it ruined her makeup, and she didn't care. "I didn't think you'd come. I told them not to expect you. Quinn, I'm so sorry. I was a kid, and I didn't understand, and by the time I understood you were gone, and I didn't know how to fix it. I've wanted to call you for years. I just thought you hated me." I had walked in there ready to blow up her wedding. I had not, in any of my planning, prepared for the possibility that my sister had spent 9 years missing me too. That changed how I did it. Not whether. How. I asked the bridesmaids to give us a minute, and then I sat my little sister down, in her wedding dress, 20 minutes before she was supposed to walk down the aisle, and I did the hardest thing I have ever done, which was hand her the truth gently, knowing it would break the best day of her life to save the rest of them. I told her what Garrett had done, not as a sister with a grudge. As a master electrician, which is a person whose entire licensed job is to look at something that seems fine and tell you where it will fail. I told her about the flip, the forged sign-off, my name on his lie. I told her about the fire in the family who got out by minutes. I had it on my phone, because I'm the kind of person who keeps her records clean, the fire marshal's report and the board complaint and the documentation that the inspection was forged. I didn't ask her to take my word. I never ask anyone to take my word. The paper is the point. She read it. Her hands were shaking, and then she asked me the question I'll never forget, the one that told me she was, underneath everything, more mine than theirs. "If I weren't your sister," she said very quietly, "if I were just some woman who hired your company, and you found this out about the man I was about to marry, would you tell me?" "In a heartbeat," I said. "I'd tell a stranger. That's the job." "Then you'd have told a stranger something you almost didn't tell me," she said, "because I'm family." And she started to cry again, but differently. That's so backwards. That's so messed up. We're supposed to be the ones you protect first. We sat with that, both of us understanding, at the same time, exactly how upside down the whole house we'd grown up in had been. She didn't marry him. She walked out of that side room in her wedding dress, and she did not go toward the aisle. She went toward Garrett, and she handed him back the truth he'd handed everyone else. And she did it with a composure that frankly impressed me, because it turned out my baby sister had some steel in her that nobody had ever needed her to use before. The wedding came apart in the next hour, the way these things do, in waves, the guests confused, the band not knowing whether to play. Garrett tried for a while the things men like him try. He raised his voice. He called me jealous, bitter, a liar, the difficult sister, every label he'd correctly guessed my family would be primed to believe. And for one ugly moment, I watched my parents' faces flicker toward believing him, because believing him was easier, because the alternative was admitting that the daughter they'd discarded was the one who'd just saved them. And that's a hard thing to swallow at 300 chairs worth of public. But I had the paper. I always have the paper. The fire marshal's report doesn't care who the family favorite is either. And when my father, with his clean glasses, actually read it, I watched a thing happen to him that I'd waited a long time to see and took no pleasure in at all. I watched him understand. So now we come back to the beginning, to my mother standing by the gift table, wondering aloud what could possibly be missing from her perfect day. What was missing was the daughter who would have seen it. That's the whole answer. For 9 years, they'd run their family on shine, choosing the bright, easy thing every time, the arts college and the study abroad and the charming developer, and they'd thrown out the one member of the family whose entire trained instinct was to walk into a beautiful room and find the danger nobody else could see. They got rid of the smoke detector because it was annoying when it went off. And then they almost married their favorite child to a house fire in a tuxedo. Something's missing. Yeah, it had been missing for 9 years. It just drove 3 hours to put on a coat and walk into a barn and find it for them one last time. I'd love to tell you we all healed in a big warm pile after that, but you've been with me long enough to know I don't lie to you, and that's not what happened. What happened was quieter and more real. My parents and I did not become close. There was no scene where they wept and apologized for the kitchen table and the clean glasses and the 9 years. My mother tried, in her way, which was to start telling relatives the story as though she'd always known I was special, always known I'd come through, rewriting it in real time so that her judgment came out looking less like the thing that nearly destroyed her favorite daughter. I let her. I don't need my parents to confess to be free. I figured that out a long time ago, somewhere up a ladder with a wire in my hand. The people who couldn't invest in you when it costs them something don't get to claim the dividend when you turn out valuable. They can watch. They just don't get to own it. My father did one thing. A few weeks later he called, and he didn't apologize because he doesn't have it in him, but he asked, awkward and gruff, whether I'd take a look at the wiring in their house sometime, said he'd heard I was the one to ask. And I understood that was the only language he had, for I was wrong about you and I'm afraid. And please come back a little. So I went. I checked their panel. It was a mess, overloaded, the kind of thing that quietly threatens a house for years before it announces itself. I fixed it. I charged them my full rate, because some boundaries are wires too, and I'm not in the business of giving the people who undercharged me my whole childhood a discount on safety. But I fixed it. That's the most I had, and it was honest, and they took it. Haley is the one who's real now. My sister moved out of the apartment our parents paid for. Got a job, an actual one, that she found herself. She calls it being independent, and the first time she used that word to me, she caught herself, and we both laughed because that word had meant abandonment when they aimed it at me and somehow meant freedom when she chose it for herself, and we decided we were taking the word back. She comes by my shop sometimes and sits in the office while I do invoices and asks me about the trade, and last month she signed up for a course, not in electrical, in something of her own, paid for with her own money, and she sent me a picture of the receipt like it was a trophy. It is a trophy. I have one just like it from 9 years ago. Garrett, in case you're wondering, did not get to stay one town ahead this time. With Haley's wedding blown open and my complaint already filed, other people he'd stiffed found the nerve to come forward, the way people do once someone goes first. The board pulled the license he'd been operating under. Last I heard, he'd left the state entirely. There are still families out there in houses he touched, and that's the part that keeps me filing complaints. Keeps me saying no to the fast and cheap guys, keeps me doing it right when it would be easier not to. Because the work is never really about the one job. It's about the family asleep in the house 3 years from now who'll never know your name and never know they owed their lives to a stranger who refused to sign a lie. Here's what 9 years and one wedding taught me, and then I'll let you go. The people who tell you to be independent because they don't want to invest in, you think they're taking something away from you. And they are. For a while, it feels like the cruelest thing in the world, watching the love and the money and the easy soft landing all flow to someone else while you're handed a word and a closed door. But there's a thing they don't understand about what they're doing because they've never had to do it themselves. When you're forced to build everything with your own hands, you learn how everything is built. You learn where the weak points are. You learn to see the danger buried in the wall that the people who had it easy will walk right past, smiling, all the way into the fire. They made me independent to get rid of me. What they actually did was make me the only one who could see clearly enough to save them. That's not a happy ending. It's not even really revenge. It's just the bill coming due for choosing shine over substance, and substance, it turns out, was the daughter they sent away. I think about that overloaded panel in their house a lot, how it sat there for years looking fine, getting more dangerous every season, because nobody who lived there knew how to read it, and the one person who could had been told to leave. Most families have a panel like that. The trouble's always been building up quietly behind the wall. They just got rid of the only person who could have told them before it caught. I run 4 trucks now. I'm training 2 apprentices, one of them a kid who got told by her own family that she should do something more realistic. I told her electrical is about as realistic as it gets, and then I put a meter in her hand and showed her how to find the fault in a circuit everyone else swore was fine. She found it in 20 minutes. She's going to be better than me. That's where you'll usually find me. Not waiting by a phone for my parents to become people they're not. Up a ladder somewhere, hand on a wire, finding the trouble before it finds anybody else. The current goes where I tell it to now. Took me 30 years to learn that the same was true of my life. If you made it all the way down here with me, then you already know this was never a story about a wedding. It was about what you do with the truth when you're the only one holding it, and the room would rather you stayed quiet. So I'll ask you straight, the way I've earned the right to by now. Subscribe and stay, because I find one of these every few days, and the next one's about a woman whose in-laws handed her a contract they were very sure she was too simple to read. And before you go, tell me in the comments what's the panel in your family? The thing everyone walks past that you've been able to see the whole time? Say it out loud down there. Sometimes naming the fault is the first step to cutting the power to it.